Hello, my name is Jason Vivori. I'm the collections manager here at the Berkshire Museum. Welcome to Strange and Unusual Tales from the museum's collection. Today we will explore objects connected to forgotten lore and mysterious circumstances. Our first story is titled, Why Pittsfield Feared the Medical Students. We have in the collection of the Berkshire Museum several items related to Berkshire Medical College, including several diplomas. You have to understand that in 1822, when Berkshire Medical College opened in Pittsfield, people were excited, but also deeply uneasy. The new school was being built right next to the town cemetery, one of two cemeteries in operation actually at that time. You have to understand that at that time, studying anatomy was essential to becoming a doctor, but there's one big problem. The students were also expected to acquire their own cadavers for dissection. However, acquiring a cadaver was illegal unless that body was taken from an executed criminal. Given that the students were responsible for acquiring those cadavers, they had no legal means to do so, which means they turned to the time-old tradition of grave robbing. This body snatching movement was actually considered something of an epidemic at the time at Pittsfield. It was not uncommon, and there are several stories related to that. Medical students often hired resurrectionists who would dig up freshly buried bodies from local cemeteries and sell them to anatomy professors. This wasn't a rumor. This really happened in other places as well, like Boston, New Haven, and smaller towns. Graves were often found disturbed, and families began guarding burial sites and placing heavy stones and iron bars over them, often called mort safes. So when Berkshire Medical Institution announced its opening right beside Pittsfield Cemetery, people thought the motive was obvious. The Pittsfield Sun even reported that residents feared students would sneak over the fence at night in search of fresh material. The college tried to calm people down, publishing statements that its professors obtained specimens only by legal means, but trust was hard to win. In those days, the line between science and scandal was very thin, and the fear of waking to find a loved one's grave empty was very real. Our next story is about an object from the Berkshire Museum's collection, related to a story that is told in Ghosts of Old Berkshire in the 1930s. We're calling this story Burying the Devil. The object in question is a piece of stone a couple inches long, and there's a little tag on the object, an old tag, which tells a very specific story, or part of a story that you can hear in greater detail if you actually were to read that story again in publication Ghost of Old Berkshire. The tag on the piece of monument reads, "A piece of the monument, erected to the devil by the Shakers on their holy ground, where they claim to have buried the devil in Tyringham, Mass." This relates to a story that was spread widely at the time and has a lot to do with a movement amongst the Shakers at that time period. You have to start off by understanding that when the Shakers movement started, the founder of that movement was Mother Ann Lee, who came to the United States in 1774 after 2 decades having already started this movement in England. By the time that this story becomes prominent, it is related to a phase of the Shaker existence, which is their time, which was called the Era of Manifestations. In the mid-19th century, the Shakers experienced a religious revival called the Era of Manifestations, or Mother's Work. This was related to the fact that they had the founder was no longer with them, and so the generation who had known her was no longer with them, and they were looking for ways to connect to a deeper spiritual meaning at that time. This coincided with a spiritual movement that had swept the Western world at that time as well. Spiritualism was very much on the rise in the 19th century. So during this period, from 1837 to the mid-1850s, there was a great deal of excitement and religious fervor in their communities. Meetings were closed to the world's people, as Shakers had visions, spoke in tongues, and communicated with spirits. Believers in each community were divinely inspired to consecrate the highest piece of land as a feast ground and install a fountain stone. Now, when we say the fountain stone, this monument that was erected in these places, again, away from their main population, is what we're looking at here. This piece of stone would have been a part of that monument. It begins with the acknowledgement that at that time the Shakers were feeling that there was evidence of sin in their communities. Things like playing cards were being found amongst them, and they thought that this meant that the devil must be walking amongst them, and they needed to find a way to cast the devil out. So, and in this act of spiritualism, they gathered at their holy mount, at the fountain stone, and there they sung songs and performed spiritualist activities where they were claimed to don spiritual armor. Not real armor, but they sung about it, and that was the manifestation. And they manifested spiritual swords. And the story goes that they chased the devil up the mountain, and there they slew the devil and buried him. This story relates to several communities. We just happen to have a piece of the Tyringham monument where this story claims to have been related to. Our next tale, we're titling The Bloody Pit. It relates to historical events and local legends around the Hoosac Tunnel. Hoosac Tunnel's construction began in 1851 and finished in 1875, taking nearly 24 years to complete, and involved the deaths of nearly 200 workers. The deadliest accident was the explosion in the central shaft on October 17, 1867. Workers were digging the tunnel's 1,000-foot vertical exhaust shaft when a candle in the hoist building ignited naphtha fumes that had leaked from a gasometer lamp. The ensuing explosion set the hoist on fire, and it collapsed into the shaft. 4 men near the top of the shaft escaped, but 13 men working more than 500 feet below were trapped by the falling naphtha, burning wood, and pieces of iron. Pumps were also destroyed, and the shaft began to fill with water. A worker named Mallory was lowered into the shaft by rope the next day, and he was overcome by fumes and reported no survivors, and no further rescue attempts were made. Several months later, workers reached the shaft's bottom and found that several victims had survived long enough to fashion a raft before suffocating. And during the year it took to recover the bodies, locals and workers reported seeing vague shapes and hearing muffled wails near the shaft. Workmen also claimed to see apparitions of the lost miners, sometimes carrying their tools, appearing in the mist and snow on the mountaintop before vanishing. While the ghosts appeared after the bodies were recovered, the moaning sounds reportedly continued to be heard inside the tunnel. Our last story is titled Imprints of the Past. It focuses on a painting from the Berkshire Museum's collection, given to us by Zenas Crane in 1913. The title of the painting is James Stewart, Duke of Lennox and Richmond. It is a studio copy after Anthony van Dyck. It's a Flemish piece from the 17th century. It features an image of the Duke surrounded by trappings of royalty, including a greyhound and a crown. The mystery of this painting is in the damage that we can find hidden in its surface. According to a conservator in 1928 named James McAlpin, there are 4 bullet holes in the face of the Van Dyck's Duke of Richmond. There's also several sword slashes. The picture was brought to this country from a royal castle in London, and as Van Dyck was the court artist of Charles II, it is believed the picture was mutilated during the siege of Cromwell's forces. We hope you enjoyed these tales from the museum's collection. Have a safe and fun spooky season.